3. Could you read for me?
Okay. McCain died at the head of died at the age of 81.
Has died.
Died at the age of 81. Was a naval bomber pilot, prisoner of war, conservative maverick, giant of the Senate, twice defeated presidential candidate, and an abrasive American hero with a twinkle in his eye. What does it mean, a conservative maverick? Maverick
is someone who does things differently. They come up with new innovative ideas. Conservative means that, they're not over the top. They conserve, they don't use a lot of something. They're more sensitive to the needs of people, and maybe. So let's just say like this: when we talk about going to a party, and you'll say, "Oh, what should I wear?" And I'll say, "Well, it's not really casual. Just dress conservatively."
Okay. The Arizona warrior politician who survived plane crashes, several bouts of skin cancer, and brushes with political oblivion, often seemed to be perpetually waging a race against time and his own mortality while striving to ensure that his 5.5 years as a Vietnam prisoner of war didn't stand as the defining experience of his life. Oh, it's a complicated phrase.
Okay, so I'll read and then we'll talk about.
Okay.
McCain, who has died at age 81, was a naval bomber pilot, prisoner of war, conservative maverick, giant of the Senate, twice defeated presidential candidate, and an abrasive American hero with a twinkle in his eye. The Arizonian warrior politician who survived plane crashes, several bouts of skin cancer, and brushes with political oblivion, often seemed to be perpetually waging a race against time and his own mortality, while striving to ensure that his 5.5 years as Vietnam prisoner of war did not stand as the defining experience of his life. So he was, as it states, the things that he did before he died. He was in the Senate. He ran for president. He was an Arizonian warrior politician. He lives in the state of Arizona. Arizonian is a person that lives in Arizona, the state. Warrior means that he would argue a point. He wouldn't just accept it if it didn't mesh with what his opinion was. Just a second. That's my timer. Okay, so if things didn't match with the way he felt, he would argue. He survived plane crashes, and he had problems with his skin. Is there something else that was, and perpetually means forever. He was always waging a race against time by being involved in something.
In the last part of the paragraph, to ensure that while striving to ensure that his 5.5 years as a Vietnam prisoner of war didn't stand as the defining experience of his life. The last didn't stand as the defining experience of his life. Didn't stand.
Right. He didn't stand. When someone remembers a person, like Dr. Martin Luther King, what did he stand for? He stood for justice. He wanted people to do right by everyone. He wanted Black children, white children, everybody to be able to walk hand in hand. That's what he stood for. John McCain stood for many things. He was a pilot. He was a champion for schools. He was a father. And he didn't want this one thing, that he was a prisoner in war, to be one thing that people remember about him,
Okay.
because he
Okay.
stood for more than just being a prisoner.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let's go on to the next paragraph.
He spent his last few months out of the public eye in his adopted home state of Arizona, reflecting on the meaning of his life and accepting visits from a stream and of friends and all political combatants. In a memoir published in May, McCain wrote that he intended to leave the world, but had no complaints. It's been quite a ride. It has been quite a ride. I've known great patience, seen amazing wonders, fought in war, and helped make peace. McCain wrote, I've lived very well and I have been deprived of all comforts. I've been as lonely as a person can be, and I've enjoyed the company of heroes. I've suffered the deepest despair and experienced the highest exultation. In this article, he said he had known the well and he had known the worst.
Mm-hmm.
I made a small place for myself in the story of America in the history of my times.
Okay. So it's been quite a ride. I've known great passions, seen amazing wonders, fought in a war, and helped make peace, McCain wrote. I've lived very well and I've been deprived of all comforts. I've been as lonely as a person can be, and I've enjoyed the company of heroes. I've suffered the deepest despair and experienced the highest exaltation. I made a small place for myself in the story of America and the history of times. I didn't read this part here, so I'm going to go back and read. In a memoir published in May, McCain wrote that he hated to leave the world, but had no complaints. Okay, what is that paragraph that you read? It's been quite a ride. Try not to read it, just tell me what you remember.
I try to sum up what I read.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yesterday we learned by the news in France and all the world that McCain, a famous politician of the USA, died from a cancer. In fact, it was waiting because since for a few days he refused all treatments. He was in terminal phases.
Right.
But all the news try to remember what kind of man was McCain. McCain was a special politician with humor, with a lot of, of energy to fight against injustice.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have a fair line of his party. When he wasn't agree with something, he could say that, he could cry that. And that's why he was highly respected by all the fair politicians of this country and didn't have a good opinion of the new president, uh, Mr. Trump, unless they are in the same party.
Okay.
Uh,
Any questions?
no. I suppose he will have a great morning. And I suppose that Mr. Trump didn't have the audace, didn't have the front to go to the morning of McCain.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's see. Let's see. McCain had been planning his funeral services over the last year, and his family made clear that Trump is not invited, a position that has not changed. two family friends said Saturday. Former rivals and President Barack Obama and George W.
Sorry. You read now?
Yes, I was reading.
Oh yes, I lost. Could you repeat? I'm lost.
I was here. McCain,
Okay.
McCain had been planning his funeral services over the last year, and his family made clear that Trump is not invited, a position that has not changed. Two family friends said Saturday. Former rivals and President Barack Obama and George W. Bush were asked to give eulogies. People close to both former presidents and a source close to the senator told CNN earlier this year. McCain will lie in state in the Arizona Capitol on Wednesday, the day McCain would have turned 82 years old, according to the state's governor, Doug Ducey. After that service, he will be taken to Washington on Thursday and will lie in state in the Capitol on Friday, according to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's office. I'll read to the end. McCain will have a national memorial service at Washington's National Cathedral on Saturday, according to the family statement. After that, he will be taken to Annapolis, Maryland, where he will be laid to rest. McCain's two losing presidential campaigns meant he fell short of the ultimate political prize. One his story once seemed to promise after he came home from Vietnam and caught the political bug. In the end, he became a scourge of presidents rather than president himself. I'm not sure what this word scourge means, so let me take a quick look and find the word scourge. Define scourge. A whip used as an instrument of punishment. So, a person or thing that causes great trouble or suffering.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you may read.
Okay. I read the same thing?
Yes, continue
Okay.
to the end.
McCain had been planning his funeral services over the last year, and his family made clear that Trump is not invited, a position that has not changed. Two family friends said Saturday. Former rivals and President Barack Obama and George W. Bush were asked to give eulogies. People close to former president and a source close to the senator told CNN early this year. McCain will lie instead in the Arizona Capitol on Wednesday, the day McCain would have turned 82 years old, according to the state's governor, Doug Ducey. After that service, he will be taken to Washington on Thursday, and he will lie in the Capitol on Friday, according to the Senate Majority Leader McConnell's office.
Okay.
McCain will have a national memorial service at Washington National Cathedral on Saturday, according to the family statement.
Okay.
After that, he will be taken to Annapolis, Maryland, where he will be laid to rest. McCain's two losing presidential campaigns meant he fell short of the ultimate political prize. One history once seemed to promise after he came home from Vietnam and caught the political bug. In the end, he became a scourge of presidents rather than president himself. Oh, yes.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about what did you just read?
McCain organized his funeral because he knew that it was in terminal ill. He had a great opinion of President Obama and perhaps President Bush, and a bad opinion of the new president, Mr. Trump. So, at the funeral, only the former president are invited.
Mm-hmm.
After that, he will have national funeral. First, he will lie instead the Arizona Capitol for one day, just the day where he could have 82 years old.
Mm-hmm.
After that, he will be led to Washington on Thursday, and he will lie in the Capitol, that I suppose is the big building for the great man of the history of the USA.
Yes, great leaders. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
After that, he will have a service at the cathedral on Saturday where the crowd could participate.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, he will stay quiet in a cemetery of the the Maryland,
Mm-hmm.
who was his home born, where his born home, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And the last paragraph told us about his tentatives to become president, where two times he fell. He fell,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of became president, he became a scourge for the presidents in exercise. And most of the time, he tried to influence their decision.
Based upon what you just read, does it seem that McCain would be considered an honest man?
I suppose, yes. I suppose he had a great fame.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, because he always say what seems to him just and fair.
Okay. Without looking back at the article, tell me two things that stood out to you about John McCain.
Tell me two things that
That stood out that you remember without looking at the article. Tell me two things about John McCain.
uh, but the first, but McCain perhaps doesn't agree with that. The first was that he was a hero from the Vietnam War, and he was prisoner for 5 years from with the Viet Congs.
Okay. Are those the two things or is that just one? Tell me two different things.
Yes, it's just one. And the second is he was the contestant, the failed contestant of Barack Obama in 2008 for the presidential election.
Now that wasn't in the article.
Yes, you want two things that are not in the article?
I want two things that were in the article. It doesn't say the year that he was running for president in this article. So I don't know if you're pulling from information, which is fine, but I just want to see what do you remember about what you read. So
In the article, they said that he was a hero of Vietnam.
okay, that's one.
And the second, in the article, they say he fell when he tried to contest for the presidential candidate.
Right.
He fell against Obama and he fell against, I don't remember,
Bush.
about Bush.
Okay, very good. All right, so that was good. And it was just an exercise just to get you to see what you can remember and how you would respond. So this is what I heard you say. Senator John McCain, according to this article, he ran against President Obama and President Bush. And I have forgotten what the other thing was. Oh, and he was a veteran. He was a victorious or an honored veteran. Yes. So it was just to get you to speak in a good thought. Very nicely done. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm still here. I don't like for them to go too long.